just to make you aware, we are recording. So thank you very much for joining me. We're going to go for about kind of 45 minutes. I'm going to do the very, very best that I can to speak as quickly and succinctly as possible. Those of you that have worked with me before or know much about me will know that I can talk about this stuff for days, but I'm going to try and condense it into kind of 45 minutes. So I'm going to talk for probably just over half an hour. And then if you've got questions or comments that you want to answer, then please do just let me know and we'll get those answered for you. So in the next kind of 45 minutes, really, what I'm going to highlight, what I'm going to talk through with you, as I said, this is, because of the time, this is really just a snapshot, but I'm going to talk through with you what burnout is, the most common signs of burnout and how to spot them, the impacts of burnout on what I class as the four corners of life. So for me, they are self, relationships, work, and world. I'm going to give you a really quick kind of whistle-stop tour about the 3 ways that you can prevent and recover from burnout to give you more time, more balance, and more control in your life and work. And in doing that, we'll just very quickly summarize these 3 things that I'm going to share with you, how you can use those to increase your confidence on your way back from burnout. And I'll also give you a really quick snapshot of my experience of burnout, not just once, but twice. So twice that I ended up in a state of burnout, what I've learned from that and how we can kind of take that forwards, really. I'm going to quickly show here. This isn't I'm going to then try and sell you something at the end of this masterclass. I know sometimes that's what we think we're kind of getting when we sign up to this free stuff. I'm not selling you anything. Okay. If at the end of this, you've got more questions or you want to kind of take it a little bit further, you'll find loads and loads of resources on my website. So there's podcasts, there's blogs, there's free ebook. There's masterclasses that you can purchase on there if you want to, or if you want to just connect with me on a different level, or maybe just with a kind of group. If you're on Facebook, I've just set up a new Facebook group called Core-Led Women. So Core-Led Women Facebook group. You can join me in there and we can carry on the conversation. So as I said, no selling. I'm not trying to, grab your money. If you want more, you'll find it all on the website. And if you want to join me in the Facebook group, you are more than welcome. So as I said, we're going to cover in the next kind of 45 minutes what burnout is, most common signs of, and how to spot them, the impact on the 4 corners of your life, as I've kind of labeled them. And the corners for me are CORE-NERS, so self, relationships, work, and world, and the 3 ways that you can prevent them. Or prevent burnout from impacting you. So a lot of the time when clients come to me to I suppose help them overcome burnout, help them overcome some of the guilt, some of the overwhelm, a lot of the time, and this may resonate with some of you, but a lot of the time the women that come to me, they are seen as successful, they're absolutely successful, but they don't always feel it. They don't always feel that they're being recognized enough for their efforts. They are finding themselves overwhelmed by guilt more often than not. They are struggling with kind of not enough time tends to fall into their vocabulary quite a lot. They tend to be lacking boundaries. They tend to be people pleasing. They are trying as much as possible to prove their worth. They feel that it's selfish if they're taking time out for themselves. They feel that they are spinning too many plates. They're exhausted. They're losing interest in things that they used to love. Their energy is decreasing day by day. And a lot of the time they find themselves feeling a bit lost, kind of, is this it? What's next for me? Is this all, that is kind of coming for me? What is the next step? What do I want? But that kind of inner feeling of lost and not knowing where to go. And some or all of that may resonate with those of you that are on the call today or watching on the replay. And all of those things that I've just listed then tend to impact, as I said, these 4 corners of self, relationships, work, and world. And if you've been under a lot of stress for a prolonged period of time, then it could be that all of those things that are on the list that I've mentioned, it could be that you are at the place of burnout. And obviously what we want to do is prevent that from happening, and or help you recover and come out of the other side of that. For context, 1 in 3 women at the minute are considering leaving or stepping down from their roles as a result of burnout. That's 1 in 3 women. Just before the beginning of 2020, just before we kind of went into lockdown, that was about 1 in 4. So whilst the numbers haven't changed massively during this period, we are, if 1 in 3 of us are experiencing burnout, something has to change. And we're also seeing 57% of women are saying that they are worried about switching off from work for fear that if they do, this will impact their career progression. So we've got over half of women at home, particularly again, with everything over the last couple of years, we have been working from home much more. And this feeling and this real feeling of fear that if I switch off, people are either going to think that I'm not working hard enough, or that I'm not engaged enough in my work, that this is somehow going to impact my progression or impact how my leaders or my managers or whoever feel that I'm engaged with the organization. And I don't know about you, but I feel that some of those stats are really, really scary. 1 in 3 of us are experiencing burnouts, and 57% of us are worried about switching off from work. And if we're not switching off and the stress continues to increase, we're going to see more and more of us reaching burnout. And from my perspective, the way that women are working isn't working. And whilst our leaders and our organizations definitely need to make a lot of changes in the workplace to prevent burnout, and I don't just mean the token week off that many organizations started to implement last year. We saw organizations shutting down for a week. We're going to close for a week because we think our people are at risk of burnout. 1 week off is not going to prevent or fix burnout. The working practices are what need to change to stop us from getting to burnout. If we haven't got the right amount of people, if we're being given too much work to do, if we're not being given enough support, enough time, or enough resources, 1 week off is not going to fix any of that. And if it's genuine burnout that you are at, and if any of you are at that place or have been at that place, like a holiday or 1 week off is not going to fix burnout, because the prolonged stress that we've been through will have started to have a bigger impact in us. So we need our leaders to be really, and our organizations, and for those of us that are leaders within our organizations, we really need to be looking at everything that needs to change from a culture perspective, from a workplace perspective, but also we as individuals, we as women, we as professional women, us as leaders, are also responsible for playing our part to prevent us from getting to the point of burnout. In 2019, the World Health Organization categorized burnout as a workplace phenomenon. And they said that burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And they characterized it by 3 dimensions. Firstly, they said it was feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. Secondly, they said it was an increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism relating to the job, and also reduced professional efficacy. But they said that burnout specifically relates in the occupational context and should not be applied to describe experiences in other areas of our lives. Now, from my experience, whilst that definition may be helpful when we're looking at workplace stress, from my experience and that of my clients, actually burnout can be much, much more than just being linked to work. Burnout can occur anywhere in our lives, particularly where we have prolonged periods of high stress levels. So whether it's family, health, or workplace, whether it's something that we're feeling internally, we can get to that point of burnout. And when burnout hits, we can begin to feel alone. We can start to feel isolated. We can think that we are the only person that this is happening to. And I suppose my reassurance for you today is that you are not alone. So we said 1 in 3 of us are at this point. And I want to just share a couple of, or three things really that some of my one-to-one clients, or those that have been in my online program, have shared about their feelings. And again, some of this may resonate with you. So the first said that when I reached burnout, I thought that I had failed. I'd been following Kelly and her work for a while and kept seeing her talk about stress and the importance of taking time out and setting boundaries. And I always thought, I do not have time for that. I honestly never felt like burnout would happen to me. I have a good job, a wonderful family, and great friends, but I realized through working with Kelly that boundaries are absolutely vital. She said that she's made some enormous changes in all areas of her life, having just started off with a 10-minute walk every lunchtime. And she can say that a year later, she's absolutely not the same person. The second was very similar. Burnout was always one of those things that I thought happened to other people. And when it hit me, it knocked me off my feet. I felt like a total failure. We're seeing some patterns here, aren't we? I lost all of my confidence. And on top of that, we went into lockdown and it felt like my entire world caved in on me. At first, I thought what I was feeling was normal. After all, when we hit burnout, we were all in the same boat. Then I watched a video that Kelly had posted and contacted her immediately about working with her, and I've never looked back. And the third says, I started off tired, constantly tired. And then my anxiety went through the roof. I started having panic attacks in the toilet at work, but I hid it all. Everyone thought I was the superwoman and always commented on how amazing I was, and I felt like a fraud. I worked harder to overcompensate for how I was feeling, and because I was doing even better at work, I was given more and more responsibility, and I said yes to it all. I didn't want anyone to catch me out as the fraud that I felt. And then one morning, I had the worst panic attack ever in front of my husband, and he made me stay home from work. She says, I was so mad at him. 2 weeks later, and the GP was sending me for counselling. A friend of mine recommended Kelly. I'm so grateful that they did. I honestly think she saved my life, even though she'll say it was all me. Burnout really can happen to any of us if we don't take the steps now to make the change. Any of that feeling familiar, or can you recognize any of that within yourselves? You said you'll see some of those commonalities. And I think the biggest one is this feeling like we failed. That comes up pretty much with every single woman that I speak to, like I'm failing in some way, shape, or form. So in terms of the signs of burnout, so some of the mentions there that I've done from the clients, they're talking about this constant feeling of tiredness. They're talking about this constant feeling of overwhelm, of feeling like they failed. We're seeing some that are talking about anxiety and panic. I think one of the biggest ones there, though, is the overworking. If I keep overworking, I can somehow overshadow all of this because everybody else will think that I'm on top of things. So I'm going to keep working and working and striving and show that I've got all this stuff in hand. And that was definitely what happened to me, because as I said, not just the first time that I hit burnout, but also the second. But in terms of the most common signs that I've identified of burnout, as I said, from my own experiences in 2013 and 2015, but also with the work that I've done through clients, the first really is around withdrawal. And when I say withdrawal, it really is, I suppose, coupled with the overworking. So two of the most common signs, the first is the overworking, and the second is the withdrawal. And I find that they tend to be really coupled with one another. So the withdrawal tends to be withdrawing from the things that you absolutely love. So whether that's spending time with girlfriends, whether that's spending time with family, whether that's going to the gym or art classes or photography or dance classes or whatever it is that might be your thing. For me, I used to, I could get through book after book after book, and I just read. My kind of relaxation thing was reading, and a real telltale sign for me was when I stopped doing that. I didn't want to do it. Didn't make any sense to me. Another thing that I withdrew from was my yoga. I started doing yoga back in 2009 and just completely stopped all of my yoga. I hadn't really I hadn't recognized at the time that this withdrawal was part of that. It was just, I'm really busy and I'm really stressed. But coupled with that, I withdrew from the things that I really loved doing, and I started to work even harder. Like I was doing 16 or 18-hour days. I was commuting to and from London every day. I would be working on the train. I would be getting an earlier train. I would be staying in the office later. I would be working on the train on the way home. And then I would be picking up work again of an evening. And I genuinely thought this was just part of, you know, I'm in this big director role. I'm on this, you know, I've got this 6-figure salary. This is just what happens to people that are earning this amount of money. Like, surely this is perfectly normal. But again, if I stop back and reflect, 99.9% of my other colleagues were not doing the hours that I was doing. They were not pushing themselves to the point that I was pushing. They were still doing all of the things that they loved. And yet somehow I'd got it in my head that this is just what comes with the job. And I'd had so many signs of, you need to be switching off, and I ignored them all. So hand in hand, in terms of some of the signs that we see of burnout, we've got this withdrawal mapped with this constant overworking. We'll also find that we are in this kind of state of constant fatigue and exhaustion. So it doesn't matter how much rest you have, it doesn't matter how much sleep you have, you are always feeling tired. But it's more than tired. It can also come as like a heaviness, like your entire body, your entire being just feels heavy. And again, one of the things for me, which again, I hadn't noticed, but I had some days where, like, even picking up a glass of water, the glass of water felt too heavy. And yet I would still get myself to the station and get myself on the train and get myself into work and do 16 or 18 hours at work and then go home and then sleep and then start exactly the same pattern every day. Because I just felt I need to keep going. I've got to keep going with this. We've touched on this one already, but then this increased feelings of failing, like literally, if I stop, my whole world is going to crash around me. And it doesn't matter how good I am or how much work I'm doing or how much everybody else is telling me how amazing I am, there's this constant feeling of failing. And then coupled with that, or added to that, we've then got this increase in this brain fog. Like, no matter how much I try to think about things or manage things, like I'd never really been much of a list maker. I just knew what needed to be done and I'd get it done. But I found myself, I had lists for everything. Like, I had lists for what I would be wearing when I woke up in the morning. I had lists for, you know, I'd set myself alarms on my phone for what time I needed to leave the house to get my train. Alarms for everything, like check in on this person, check in on this person, check in on this person, be at this meeting, do this. I had alarms and notes and all sorts going off everywhere, because it was literally, if I didn't have it to hand, I had no idea what was happening. Literally no idea what was happening. So some of these symptoms to look for are this withdrawal coupled with the overworking, constant fatigue and exhaustion, but it's more than tiredness. These increased feelings of failing, and that can be coupled with anxiety, and then this brain fog. Now, I'll say at this point, burnout is not, it's not a mental health condition. However, if we are putting our bodies and our minds through this prolonged period of stress, it can, if not dealt with and if not managed and recovered from quickly, it can lead us to the point of mental health conditions. And it can also get us to the point of physical health conditions. Because of this, the level of intensity when it comes to the stress, and this may be very different for all of us, but the level of intensity when it comes to that level of stress, like, we're not conditioned for that. Now, I'll always say a good level of stress is healthy for us, right? A certain level of stress or adrenaline, if we give it its correct name, but a certain level of good stress is really, really good for us. It's what gets us out of bed in the mornings. It's what helps us complete our goals. If any of us are into kind of sports or any of that kind of stuff, it's the thing that gets us over the finish line. Yeah, if we think about athletes, sports people, any of those, they need a level of adrenaline. And sometimes, you know, particularly, I love watching the kind of the track races, particularly kind of 100-meter, when you see people kind of really getting themselves riled up as they get on that start line, like that's them getting themselves full of that adrenaline, that good stress, because without that, they probably wouldn't get off the starting block and they probably wouldn't get over that finish line. But if we have that increased adrenaline for so long, and sometimes it can come up, can't it, in that kind of fight or flight response. And that's where some of this feeling of failing and overworking can come from. We're in this constant fight or flight, like I've got to be going at 10,000 miles an hour. And if I stop, I'm going to crash, I'm going to burn. So I've got to keep going and going and going and going and going. We're not made for that. And for those of us, again, I think when I got to the point of burnout, I have always been somebody that will go at 10,000 miles an hour. That's my natural, you know, my kind of natural position. I have two speeds, and that's 10,000 miles an hour or off. I still really don't, even after 2 lots of burnout, I still really don't. I'm either going kind of full pelt or I've stopped. But I have learned to recognize over the years where I'm doing too much and where I need more rest. Okay, so we need to recognize these things in ourselves. And when we're clear on who we are, when we have those high levels of self-awareness, and I also think particularly as people, but I think more so as women, we are naturally very intuitive. We are very in tune with our bodies. Like we know when something is off for us. And when we know that something is off, really it's at that point that we need to start to do something. We need to start to make some of those changes. And I had excuses about every single sign that was presenting itself in the lead up to my burnout, the first time and the second time. So we need to recognize these signs. We need to pay attention to that self-awareness, to that intuitive part of us that says, hang on a minute, Kelly, something's not right here. And then we need to either sit with that or we start to make some of those changes. We make those changes as quickly as possible, avoiding the excuses, because again, sometimes when we're in that high level, high adrenaline, high stress, really that's when ego kicks in. And it's, you know, that little voice that tells us, you know, Kelly, if you don't do that, everybody's going to think you're a failure. If you don't do that, people are going to start judging you. If you don't think that, this person's going to have something to say about you. That little ego, we need to quieten that. We need to pay attention to that intuition, and we need to do what we need to do. So I suppose a little bit more about my experience. So I had, as I said, I'd always been, you know, kind of 1,000 miles an hour type person. And when I started my career in kind of HR leadership, HR and people really in 1998, I know I only look 21. So we don't need to try and work out the years. But yeah, 1998, I started my working career, and I had continued to progress. And a lot of the time I didn't really pay attention to it. I was just, you know, I'd get pay rises, I'd get promotions, you know, you're doing great, you're doing great. And I kept on going. And I had an 8-year period where I had 7 promotions, and I added £100,000 onto my salary over this 8-year period. And I kept thinking that if I kept on going, I would keep on getting rewarded, and I'd keep on getting the promotions, and I'd keep on getting the pay rises. And I was the main breadwinner at home. And, you know, I genuinely thought that everything that I was doing, you know, I was setting this great example for my sons, right? That hard work pays off, and really pushing and really striving. And as I said, when I got to this, really to the kind of points of burnout, I was on this ridiculous salary. I was, you know, I had benefits coming out of my ears, bonuses that were amazing. But I'd thought to myself that this is just what comes with this job title and this salary and this status. This is what everybody's doing. Yet the logical part of me knew that not everybody else was doing this. And I'd started to have signs of getting to the point of burnout for probably 2 years before I ultimately crashed, and I ignored them all. So I started to get lots and lots of headaches. But for me, it was just, well, I had an excuse for all of them, right? I was talking to Ali before we kind of started about glasses, right? So if I got a headache, maybe I just needed to go to the optician and get my eyes checked again. Maybe I just spent too much time on my computer. Maybe I hadn't drank enough water. Maybe I hadn't eaten enough. And, you know, I say no word, this is no word of a lie with this. And I say it now and just think, how could you have been so bloody stupid? I would have some days where I literally would not eat or drink a thing because I was so fixed on, this is what you've got to do. I would get home someday and I would be feeling sick and dizzy, and also, and it'd be like, oh shit, like I haven't had like a drink of water since like last night, or I haven't eaten since last night. Okay, so tomorrow you just need to make sure that you drink. So I take like water bottles or like the carry cups with like my tea in them to try and remove that. But I was constantly pushing and pushing and pushing. So I ignored all of the headaches because I didn't think that was, or I made excuses for all of the headaches. I made excuses for the tiredness. Like, of course I was going to be tired. I'm working 18-hour days. Everybody would be tired. But I wasn't paying attention to the fatigue and the lethargy that was happening. And I ignored those signs for about 2 years. And at the back end of 2012, I was in a really tough situation. The workplace that I was in was hugely toxic, lots and lots of toxic leaders. And I felt like I was really stepping away from who I was, like my values and who I am at the core. It was as though I'd kind of started to leave all of that on the doorstep as I came into the office, because I just kept going and pushing and thinking I could change this. And again, when we talk about this overworking, somehow I had convinced myself that I could transform this 3,500 person organization on my own. Like I could transform this toxicity. So I started pushing even harder. And in the January of 2013, I'd had some difficult conversations before the Christmas. And I was having to implement a really, really awful project from the January going forwards. And I'd been thinking about this all Christmas. So I hadn't really switched off at all over the Christmas break. And I went back to work in the January. We went back to work that year on the Wednesday. And by lunchtime on that Wednesday, I could not stand up. Like my body was screaming. I had this enormous crippling pain in my stomach to the point that I could not stand up straight. I was like hunched over, couldn't stand up straight. And the other directors that I was working with on this project would say, you know, like, Kelly, you really need to go home. And it was like, no, like I'm a director. I've got to do my job. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. And again, like ego was like, you've got to stay because otherwise everybody's going to think you're the biggest failure ever. So I carried on going. And I went into work the following day and I still could not stand up. And I went into work the following day and I still could not stand up. But I was just making excuses and I was telling myself that I had to keep going. On the train on the way home that night, and for any of you that have been on any trains, you know the trains with the lovely electric door toilets, right? You don't know if you've pressed the button and locked yourself in. You don't know if the flashing is telling you to lock the door or not lock the door or whatever, but there's lovely toilets with the swing doors. I'd gone in there, lights flashing all over the place. I didn't realize I had passed out in that toilet until I hit my head on the sink. But I made my way back to my chair. I managed to get off the train at my platform. And thankfully, one of my friends had been a few carriages back on the same train as me on the way back from London. And she literally came up behind me and caught me as I was about to fall. Her husband was picking her up from the station. They took me straight to A&E. Nobody could give me an answer. And I had 7 months of back and forth with people not being able to give answers, this crippling pain. I literally spent 7 months looking like some kind of 110-year-old woman with this hunched back, hunched over, couldn't stand up properly, couldn't do anything. I was being rushed in and out of A&E 5 times over this 7-month period, and I couldn't stop it. But I also didn't stop, because I didn't want to be the woman director. I was the only woman director at the business. I didn't want to be the woman director that wasn't up to the job. I didn't want anybody to think that I was a failure. I didn't want to be the youngest director in the organization that wasn't cut out for this job. I didn't want to be the only one with young children that wasn't able to hack it. And I kept going and I kept going and I kept going. And in the July, I ended up having to have 2 operations in 48 hours. I started to do lots and lots of different tests. In the July, I had 2 operations in 48 hours. It wasn't until after I'd gone back to see these 2 different consultants that both of these consultants started speaking to me about stress levels in my life. And both of them mentioned this thing called burnout. And I can remember thinking, like, you're both really stupid, because I'm not stressed and it can't be burnout. And of course, like, stress doesn't do this to your body, and stress doesn't do this, and stress doesn't do that, right? So really, none of you know what you're talking about. But the turning point for me was one day, so I'd been to see both of these consultants kind of a week after these operations. The turning point for me was laying on the sofa one day, having seen both of these consultants. I was like bored rigid with the crap that was on daytime TV back in 2013. Laying on the sofa, and my sons had come in from school and they'd sat on the coffee table in front of me, and I looked like crap. But my default response to my sons was, don't worry, mum's going to be absolutely fine, and mum's going to be back at work soon. That was my default, right? I was better when I was able to get back to work. That was just my default position. And what my sons looked at each other, and one of them said to me, but mum, we don't want you to go back to work because your job is killing you. And that was like the absolute knife to the heart, because my sons had been able to see something that clearly I couldn't, or my sons were able to see something that I was trying to ignore. And so that was the turning point for me. That was right. Okay, what is wrong? What's got me to this point? What has allowed me to get to this point? What has caused me to stop thinking about this physical reaction to burnout and the mental and emotional reaction to burnout? What is it that I need to do? And what was the most glaringly obvious thing to me was I needed to get back to being aligned with my core values and who I was. Because for the last couple of years in this toxic organization that I'd been working in, it was like this was me and this was my values, and the work that I was doing was somewhere over here, like way out of the picture. It was not aligned with who I was. I'd in effect switched off that intuition, switched off that this is who I am and this is what I do. I'd switched off the, I will always do what's right. Integrity is really important to me. Like, I'm going to have a voice. I'm going to do, it was as though all of those parts of me I just lost, because it was like, do you know what? You're all just terrible and I can't keep doing this anymore. So I made a vow at that point that I would go back to work, that I would stay aligned to my core values, that I was going to go back to being me. And within 3 months, I decided that I could not stay within that workplace. But more than that, I couldn't stay within corporate. It was like, I've got this, now I'm kind of back to myself, like there's stuff that I have to change. I need to be a voice. I've got to show that there is a different way of doing things, that there's a more ethical way of doing things. And that's what happened. So in 2014, I started my first business. I know one of you on the call was one of my very, very first customers, my very first clients. And I've continued to work, with that organization over the last kind of 8 years or so in various different guises. But I realized that there had to be a different way. Now, not all of my clients get to the point of I've got to leave my job because it's all terrible and kind of this is how we do it. But when we get back to who we are at our core, when we understand who it is that we are, that's how we start to make the changes for ourselves. And I think for many of us as women, when we talk about preventing burnout or recovering from burnout and all those things that I spoke about before, the feeling lost, the people pleasing, the being overwhelmed with guilt, the feeling like we're having to prove ourselves, the not wanting to switch off because of that fear, all of those things come from us not being aligned with who we are at our core. And I think particularly for many of us, as women, as leaders in organizations, whether we're running our own businesses, whatever it is that we're doing, I have definitely found, and again, as I said, I've been in the kind of leadership space now for well over 20 years. A lot of what I have been taught or trained over the years about what a good leader looks like is not always aligned to who I am at the core. I am like, and even from just one really obvious example of that, like since 1998, I have been being told and trained that great leaders are all extroverted. I'm the biggest introvert on the planet. It may not seem like, I can do the animation, I can, talk on stage in front of 10,000 people, I can do all of that, but I am literally the world's biggest introvert. But I was told and taught and trained that in order to be a good leader, you've got to be the world's biggest extrovert. That wasn't me. Now, that's just one example. But I also think over the years that we've done it, what we're classing as leadership training is really nothing more than how to do budgets, how to do agendas, and how to run meetings. We're not really talking about getting leaders to understand who they are at the core and using that to allow them to be better, greater leaders. We've got these frameworks, and from my perspective, a lot of those are outdated. A lot of them are kind of and this isn't a kind of male rant, but a lot of them have been, developed by men over years. It's a very kind of patriarchal, this is what you have to do. And for those of us as women that lead from an intuition perspective, that lead from our core values, that really understand what feels right, we may not necessarily have the data or the information for it, but we can say this feels right or this feels wrong, and we want to be able to follow our intuition. A lot of these frameworks do not work for us. And in addition to that, as women, we've got all of these labels that get put on us. Throughout school, girls have got to be the good ones, the quiet ones, the hard workers. We've got to toe the line. We've got to do this, we've got to do that. And then we get older and we're sisters, mothers, daughters, wives, girlfriends, leaders, managers, all of these labels. And again, a lot of the women that I work with, particularly over, over the last few years on a one-to-one basis, a lot of them have been so consumed and hidden by all of these labels. If I say to them, who are you? Like, genuinely, who are you? 90% of them cannot answer that question because they have no idea. They can replay me the values. Well, I'm Kelly, or the labels rather. I'm Kelly, I'm 41, I live in Peterborough, I've got 2 sons, I'm a partner, I own a business. But they struggle to get past the labels of mum, daughter, business owner, their age and their name, to really be able to think about who are you at your core? What are your values? What are your beliefs? What are your strengths? What motivates you? What drives you? What are you afraid of? They can't do that because a lot of these frameworks have been suffocating them to get them to the point of, you just need to tick this box. As long as you can tick this box, you're a great leader. And we've got to get past that. So in order to get us past the point of burnout, in order to help us get to the point of preventing burnout, in order to help us move past guilt and overwhelm and into who we are, after years of doing this work, years of research, looking at research, completing my own research, working with clients, looking at neuroscience and how our brains work and energy and all of those sorts of things, for me, it comes back to 3 things that we need to do. Just 3 things. I'm not going to give you overwhelming frameworks or any of those. There are 3 things that we do to prevent burnout, to recover from burnout, to help us get rid of that guilt and that overwhelm, to help us move through that exhaustion and that tiredness and the people pleasing and the not feeling good enough. Just 3 things. Okay, 3 things. The first is get really, really clear on who you are. So I would encourage you and invite you all to sit with the question, who am I? And you can journal it and you can write it, but keep going with that question and keep going until you feel you have nothing left to answer, and then go some more. And if you need a kind of prompt to get you started, think about your values, think about what lights you up, think about what frustrates you, like what really pisses you off when it's missing. What frustrates you from other people? Those will be signs of what your values are and who you are. Think about your strengths, think about your priorities, your goals, your dreams, things that you used to love as a kid, things that you really enjoy doing. But sit with the question, who are you? Because that will get you to who you are at your core. And once you understand who you are at your core, and it can be an endless cycle, because you can dig and dig and dig and dig at some point today, and then you might do the exercise 3 months from now, and you might be able to go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. So it's an endless kind of cycle that you will find yourself going through. But start with the question, who are you? When you understand more of who you are at the core, the second thing to do then is then to set better boundaries. And the boundaries start to become easier to create and maintain when we understand who we are at the core. And it's not all about boundaries. Again, I think when I kind of first start to talk about this to women, a lot of them think that boundaries is really just about saying no. And they'll say to me, oh, I don't like, I find it difficult saying no. I don't like saying no. I can't say no. And it's much, much more than that. But I'd also invite you to think about, if it is about this fear of saying no, I would bet you that every time you say yes to somebody else, you're already saying no to yourself. So you're already saying no, probably without even realizing, you're just doing it to yourself. But the boundaries that you have, and I suppose I like to think about them also a bit, and this may sound a little bit woo-woo or kind of a little bit out there, but for me, the boundaries is about this kind of self-honoring. What boundaries do you need to have in place to help you manage your time, but more importantly, to manage your energy? We can all talk about time management until we're kind of blue in the teeth. We all have the same time throughout the course of the day. We may have different priorities. We may have different things that we need to focus on, but the most important thing is managing our energy. And we can do that by ensuring that we have the boundaries. So firstly, understand who you are at the core. Secondly, ensure that you've got your boundaries in place. And then thirdly, once you've got your boundaries and you know who you are, take time out, give yourself permission to take time out for you on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. And sometimes this feels like the hardest one, because it's like, well, I'm already too busy. And you already said at the beginning that, this is about not having the time and being too busy and all of this sort of stuff. But that's what I'm saying, work it through in this order. Who are you? What boundaries do you need? And then you will understand more of the importance of creating and taking that time for yourself. It could be a 5-minute walk. It could be sitting and enjoying a cup of tea with absolutely no distractions whatsoever. It might be getting back to some of the things that you used to love: photography, going to the gym, painting, whatever it is it might be. It might be sitting with a book. It might be spending time with people. And it doesn't always mean doing nothing. Again, if you've seen any of the kind of blogs or videos that I've done on the 7 different types of rest, this isn't always about doing nothing. It's about doing the things that fill you back up with energy. Right? It's about that recharging. So who are you is the first, then your boundaries, and then taking time for yourself. That's your 3 things. No magic frameworks, no long complicated anything, just those 3 things. They will help you prevent burnout. And if you're at the point of burnout, they will help you recover from it. And when you get really, really clear on doing those 3 things for yourself, you will notice then that your confidence increases. Okay. I've spoken still for far longer than I said I have, haven't I? But there we go. So that's where I'm going to leave it with you today. So we've covered what burnout is, most common signs and how to spot them, the impact that it can have on self-relationships, work and world, and the 3 things that you can do to prevent and recover from burnout for more time, balance and control in your life and work. What I'd like you to all do now is just, I ask everybody at the end of every workshop or session that I run to do a kind of I commit to. So as a result, like you've invested 45 minutes of your time this morning, I'd love you to make a kind of I commit to statement. So as a result of this session today, what can you commit to doing or changing within the next 24 or 48 hours as a result of this session? And it's as simple as I commit to. And it might be rewatching the session. It might be making a change. It might be giving myself 10 minutes. It might be starting with the who are you question. But I commit to what is one thing that you can do within the next 24 or 48 hours as a result of today's session to start to get this stuff changing. And one of the reasons that I ask that, lots of us will think that was a great session, I'm going to go away and do something else. And then 3 months later, we're like, what was that session that I did? If we don't make the changes within the first 5 days of learning something, we'll have forgotten over 70% of it. So making that commitment, you commit to yourself to say, this is what I'm going to do differently. I'm going to leave it there. If anybody's got questions, I'll take them. And as I said at the beginning, and there's no sell, but if you'd like more resources, podcast, blog, ebook, whatever, you can head over to my website, so kellyswingler.com. And if you'd like to, if you're on Facebook and you'd like to join me, there is the Court-Led Women Facebook group that I have just started. You can come and join us in there. We can see what we can do to help supporting and lifting one another. But I'm going to leave it there. Any questions, comments, feedback, anything that anybody would like to ask? If not, you can all go. You can unmute yourselves or feel like type it. There we go. Hi, Ellie.
Just to say thanks very much. Really appreciated.
You are more than welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anything from anybody else? If not, I'm going to let you all go.
I just wanted to say, go Sandra. No, go Sandra. I was late. No, please, you go first.
I was just going to say thank you very much, and that was quite the cautionary tale, so definitely a lot of food for thought there. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. It was a pleasure to see you. Thank you. Catherine.
I was just going to say thank you, and also I think I've been sort of doing some of these things already, and I noticed myself getting a bit upset and unfocused, and I've been doing cold water swimming about 2 or 3 times a week for the last 4 months, and losing the habit, and I went to do it today. So yeah, and I was just going to sort of add to what you said, is also just make it really small, incremental. Don't overwhelm yourself. When I started journaling last year, I had a coach sort of say to me, because I was worried about sort of doing it wrong. She's like, just put one, just commit to writing 1 word 3 times a week. Yeah. And that really sort of helped me. And now like I can sometimes fill out 2 or 3 pages before I go to bed. So yeah, just that was my thing that sort of really helped me, is just
absolutely.
1 word.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And well done on getting back in the cold water this morning. Good for you. Thank you. Anybody else before I let you all go? No. Well, thank you so much for joining me. As I said, I'm gonna I'll send the replay out, so you've got all of that. So those of you that did miss some of it, those of you that weren't able to join today, you've got the replay. Thank you so much for joining me. Pleasure to see you all, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye,
Take care.
everybody.
Yes,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.